Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. Today, I am bringing my top 5 most underrated ships list. So, when I say underrated ship, I mean it's a ship that most players think is pretty terrible. I know that for each of these, there's certainly some of you guys that love these ships. I know because I've talked about these before on the channel, and every time I mention them, a good bit of y'all come to the defense of these ships, and today I'm just kind of going to acknowledge what they do get right and how that even though they may have one or two big weaknesses, they are still a pretty solid ship all around. And some of these ships have even gotten better with a few small buffs here and there that Wargaming has bestowed upon them. So anyway, let's go. Oh, before we get going, again, all my opinion. I am a battleship main, and you'll see that reflected in this list for sure. So let's go ahead and get into it. So number 5, we have the Tier 7 American battleship, the Colorado. So the Colorado, this is a ship that when I grinded through it the first time, it was a big pain. It was a huge pain back in the day, and I can imagine it still kind of is today. And the only big thing that's wrong with the Colorado is that it is stuck at a top speed of 20 knots. That's as fast as it can go. You can throw the speed flag on there and you go maybe 21 knots, if that. At Tier 7, where literally everything will leave you in the dust. But everything else about the ship is actually pretty solid. It has 8 16-inch guns. They're pretty dang accurate for Tier 7. If you have the spotting plane equipped, you can get it out to a decent range, even by Tier 7 standards. And if you are top tier, you can punch through the bow of anything that you meet. And when Colorado's top tier or even mid tier, it's a pretty solid ship. It runs into problems when it gets up tier to tier 9, which thankfully doesn't happen too much anymore with all the changes to matchmaking that Wargaming has implemented. So it is definitely more comfortable to play today than it was when I was going through the ship and I was getting up tier to tier 9. It certainly felt like almost every other game. So it's a pretty solid ship right now, and American AP, although it's floaty, it's also very good against cruisers, because unlike other battleship lines, the velocity on American guns are so slow that you can pin cruisers pretty dang reliably, and you see that goes all the way up through the American battleship line. But I gotta say, today in the current realm of World Warships, Colorado is pretty comfortable to play, as long as you don't run into an Atlanta or anything, or as long as you don't have to run away from anything, you'll be okay. And again, that is a big weakness of the Colorado. When your team decides to abandon a push, they're going to leave you in the dust. It's simply how the game is and how people are. So do keep that in mind. But overall, pretty solid ship, and shouldn't be too much of a pain to grind through today. I mean, you will of course get the odd tier 9 game here and there, but for the most part, should be a fairly comfortable ship to go through now. Alright, moving on to number 4, we have the Tier 7 German battleship, Gneisenau. So Gneisenau's biggest problem is that it is so dang specialized to be a knife fighter in a game where the current meta is just long-range sniping. That is the biggest issue with Gneisenau. It is so perfect for brawling. It is a fantastic brawler when it can get to do it. The problem is just it doesn't happen today barely as much as it used to back in the day. When I went through the Gneisenau the first time 2 years ago, it was fantastic. It was a blast. It was my favorite ship for a very long time. I had days where I would just play that instead of Bismarck, and I had Bismarck unlocked just sitting in my port, but I want to play more Gneisenau. It is the only tech line ship to have torpedoes. It has pretty decent secondaries. They aren't as good as, let's say, the Scharnhorst's secondaries, but they're pretty decent if you build into them. You can get them out to about 8 kilometers. The main battery guns, you're not going to hit anything outside of 12 kilometers, but when you're knife fighting and brawling from within 10 kilometers, they're perfectly fine. And I'll take the Gneisenau up against any battleship that it can meet, including all the tier 9s, and I may not win, but I can sure take most of their health with me, or I could just straight up ram them too. That's happened with Gneisenau before. I've fought Iowa's, FDG's, Izumos at very close range, and granted the Izumo and the Iowa isn't really set up for close range brawling, but still they're 2 tiers above you. And I've almost won most of the time. Some of the times I do win, some of the times I just don't. But it's a fantastically fun ship, and it has a special place in my heart. But just in today's meta, it's almost useless. And it is underrated because it can still do what it was designed to do fantastically well. It just never gets the opportunity to do it. Okay, maybe not. I can't say never because it does happen every now and then, but it's nowhere near as much as it used to, and that is really sad. And I do think this ship needs a whole lot of work from Wargaming. They either need to like bump out the secondary range, maybe give it a 9 kilometer secondary range, or just give the main guns some love, because I don't. This is a ship that, while I think the upcoming German battleship buffs, where the ship will get the American ellipse now instead of the German ellipse, I don't think that's going to be enough for the Gneiss now. For the other ships in the line, it should be well enough for them, but for the Gneiss now, it needs more work than just that. That's my opinion on this ship. It's still in my. If I had to make like a top 20 favorite ships list, it would be in there. But hope it gets the love that it needs. It's still a pretty good ship when you can get into the right situations with it. Alright, moving on to number 3. We have the Tier 9 Premium Japanese Cruiser, the Azuma. So the Azuma's biggest issue is that the Yoshino exists. And the Azuma was supposed to be the Yoshino until Wargaming decided to release the Azuma and the Yoshino. And the Yoshino is just the Azuma with slightly more accurate guns and torpedoes. And I think like slightly better AA, if that. So, there's that. But the Azuma, if you look at it by itself, it's a pretty decent super cruiser. Its guns are pretty dang accurate, I gotta give it that. And they hit friggin' hard with the HE. It hits like a truck with the HE. The issue is the armor's a joke on both the Azuma and the Yoshino. It's so easy to citadel with anything with slightly large guns. It is just one of the hugest targets that a battleship can see at Tier 9 and Tier 10. But other than that, the guns are great. The reload time's pretty good if you build for it. Other than that, it's a nice ship. The problem is it's just so dang fragile. You have to pretty much play it at the back, which, I mean, it's pretty much designed to do that. It's pretty much a larger ZOW. So when you play it like how it's meant to be played, it performs pretty dang well. But again, the Yoshino exists, so it's kind of like, why would you even bother getting the Azuma when the Yoshino exists? But I mean, I don't have enough coal for the Yoshino on top of all the other things I've gotten with coal, but I am working toward the Yoshino now. But Azuma, for what it is by itself, it's a pretty darn good ship when played correctly, which is really the only way you can play it, because if you try to play it any other way, you're just going to explode in elaborate fashion. So yeah, it's a pretty good ship. Would I recommend you get it? Not really, unless you just don't want to save up the coal for the Yoshino. But, I mean, it's great against destroyers, great against cruisers, great against battleships when played properly. So, yeah, pretty solid ship. Alright, moving on to number 2. We have the Tier 8 British battleship, the Monarch. So the Monarch, I remember going through this ship and not liking it. Because the thing with British battleships is that they have way less health than, well, not way less. They have a pretty good chunk missing out of their health pool compared to other battleships at their tier. Now, from tier 3 through tier 7, it's really not that big of a deal because most of those ships have pretty decent armor still. Especially the low to mid tiers, they're pretty tanky. The King George, it's not all that tanky, but it's still a good enough ship. It makes up for that in other areas, in my opinion. But I mean, it still does have pretty good armor for what it is too. And then you get to the Monarch. It has less health than its tier 8 counterparts. Its armor isn't that fantastic. It's still a King George, but it's a King George because it's literally the King George hull with 15-inch guns. But it's a King George at tier 8, which can see tier 10. So it's a tier 7 hull at tier 8. Huh. And it doesn't get any type of super heal like the Lion and Conqueror do to make up for their armor. That's a pretty big downside. But the guns are pretty good. They have it has a nice reload time on it. The HE, it's British BB HE, so you can, you can imagine what can be done with that. Just burn everything. And the AP, yeah, it's not normal battleship AP, but against cruisers, it's pretty dang good because it's what it's designed to do. It's pretty stealthy and get it down to about 12.7 kilometers, which is pretty sneaky for a battleship. It had okay AA back in the day, but today, God knows what is even AA. So it's a pretty solid ship, if played correctly again. And I gotta admit, I did like the King George a lot. I didn't like the Monarch, but coming back to it, I'm seeing more and more its appeal and getting used to how it's supposed to be played and playing it that way. But it's the big downside is its lack of health and its armor. Now, again, at tier 8, it's fine. At tier 9, it's okay, but at tier 10, it's not okay. Especially with that significant amount that missing health compared to its other counterparts, that really shows at tier 10. But it does have a pretty good rate of fire. It has 9 guns, and the guns can reload in 25 seconds. And of course, you have adrenaline rush that's going to get just faster as you lose health. And I mean, for a British battleship with British HE, 25-second reload time on 9 guns, that's pretty dang good, not gonna lie. And the guns are pretty accurate, I gotta give it that too. Most of the British battleships don't have the most accurate guns, but at least the Monarch, for the 4 or 5 games I played, just catching up on what I may have missed in the Monarch and taking notes, the guns seem pretty accurate, especially for tier 8. So there's all of that going toward it. So it's not as bad as I thought it was. It's definitely a lot better than what I thought it was about a year ago. Alright, so moving on to number 1 now. The tier 9 Japanese battleship Izumo. Boy, the Izumo was a steaming pile of crap back in the day when I went through it. I unwisely free XP'd through a good chunk of Amagi to get to Izumo, and I had to grind through each hull of the Izumo with no free XP to use, and that had to be one of my most painful World of Warships experiences ever. So, they have changed a lot about it though. They've improved the accuracy and pinning of her AP shells, and I gotta say, it really shows. She's a pretty dang good tier 9 now. Just in this match that I played right now is the first time I played Izumo in forever. And you can hear I actually have Dasha on there because I didn't have a commander set up for Izumo, so I had to use my Dasha commander. And I was pleasantly surprised with how she performed. Her guns hit really hard now. They just pin the crap out of everything. They are 410 millimeter guns, and I gotta say, I really do notice the accuracy buff because, oh my god, before, it was just like a shotgun at every range. Just shotgun at max range, shotgun at close range, shotgun at medium range. But now, the groupings are much more accurate, they're much tighter. She packs one heck of a punch, and it's great, especially when you're top tier in a tier 9 game, and there's tier 7s that you get to pick on. But even in tier 10 games, she still is quite good. Now, back in the day, her A was actually pretty dang good as well, and today, I mean, it's okay from what I've experienced, but it's definitely not as good as it used to be, and that's saying something, because Japanese battleships don't normally have good AA, but the Izumo did have pretty good AA, but its issue was, as you can see on the model, it's just kind of scattered everywhere on the deck, so after eating enough HE, you don't really have your fantastic AA anymore. Well, back in the day. Today it's just kind of whatever, because again, what is AA now? So it's a pretty good ship now. It just carries that reputation of being a turd from a couple of years ago. That's the big issue with it now. It actually does have a pretty dang thick armor belt, which from longer ranges is pretty detrimental to you, but from closer ranges, when you're angling right, which is pretty easy to do considering the turret setup on the ship, you will bounce a lot off of your armor belt. But again, used to be bad back in the day. Just a couple little improvements that they've added to have really helped her out. And while again I wouldn't say this is a ship you should be grinding in the Japanese line for, grinding through it now should be much better than it was back in the day. Alright guys, so that's what my 5 underrated ships are. Let me know what you get your guys' top 5 underrated ships are in the comments down below. Let me know, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? You have anything extra to add to any of the ships that I covered? I know it's mostly battleships, but again, I'm a battleship main. I've spent most of my time grinding through the lines with most of these ships, except for the Azuma. Of course, that's a free XP ship. But anyway, that is my opinion. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Monday. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. We're on our way to 7,000 subscribers, and we are very close to reaching the halfway point by now. I cannot thank you guys enough for that. Again, guys, hope you're having a great day. I hope to catch all of you guys in the next one.